in the United States in May 2009. The 7th point of his 10-point plan addressed the international aspects. He said then that the United States had to start to build the sorts of relationships we needed to ensure at the international level the security of the United States cyber systems. What we've seen more recently, in late May this year, just days before the second Worldwide Cybersecurity Summit in London hosted by the East-West Institute, the United States announced an international strategy for securing cyberspace. And this is an important advance. It mirrors what other countries have been doing in terms of developing international policies. And in fact, the United States just appointed a new coordinator for cyber issues in the United States State Department. Governments across the world are realizing how important it is to work with other governments. It doesn't matter what political color these governments have, but the United States in particular has recognized the need to work with those other governments to come to some common solutions to address these increasing vulnerabilities and these increasing threats.
Serdar, how is HP cooperating with governments around the world to address their cybersecurity needs?
Yeah, we do it on two dimensions. First, we do projects together with governments. We provide cybersecurity solutions to them. Of course, I cannot give you any specifics, any detailed information on that. The second thing we do, we try to take part in the right NGOs in the local markets, and we try to influence the government policies about cybersecurity. In Turkey, for example, we are very active in TÜBİSAT, which is the IT Industry Businessmen Association, and we try to talk to government and influence them for the right measures against cybersecurity or for cybersecurity.
Military strategists used to think in terms of ground, naval, and air forces. And now we have cyber. And that requires new international cyber policymaking. One Russian computer security company, Kaspersky Lab, believes governments and businesses are hardly mitigating cyber threats. Here is Roel Schrouwenberg, senior researcher of Kaspersky Lab.
A lot of people thought that Stuxnet was the big disaster that everybody was waiting for, that would wake up governments around the world and realize, well, our critical infrastructure is in danger and something very serious could happen. Well, the reality of the matter is that that really hasn't happened.
Now, this is the 4th largest global antivirus dealer, and it seems their warning should be heeded. Why is there so little done to counter the cyber threat? Are there serious consequences for this?
Well, thanks, Alan. I think that's a very interesting question. Clearly, Stuxnet didn't have the impact that people would have expected, and in fact, as Roel Schrouwenberg there from Kaspersky Lab was saying, but it should have had that effect. What we're seeing now in boardrooms around the world is a growing realization not only of the threat of sabotage to basic industrial processes, but we're really seeing a greater awareness that cyber attacks, criminal attacks, can have a serious impact on the global standing of corporations. One could mention, for example, the large-scale loss of customer data, credit card information, with the Sony Corporation. I think this has brought home the realization more strongly than Stuxnet that the entire financial and economic viability of corporations could be put at risk by determined attackers. So the calculation of risk is changing in boardrooms. Directors and chairs of leading corporations around the world are now becoming much more attuned to the needs, but there's still a long way to travel before we see very well coordinated positions in most global corporations on how to reconcile technical security risks with these bigger questions of financial and economic risk that are now on the table so firmly in the face of these growing attacks in the cyber domain. If I could add one footnote, Alan, I guess I'd say that your two previous questions really sort of add up to the proposition that we're in a completely new situation now compared with 10 years ago. Governments have come to realize that there's a new phenomenon here. We need new laws and new arrangements. And this is visible everywhere from the economic domain, from cyber crime, right across to the question of rules of the road for cyber warfare. We can't afford to have too many more repeat exercises of the Stuxnet operation, where across state borders the industrial processes of one state are sabotaged by another.
Greg, where the law of armed conflict arises, does it apply to cyberspace?
Well, I think that we can make an argument that the current rules of war and the current laws of international laws and the United Nations Charter do in fact apply to attack by one state on another in the cyber domain. It doesn't really matter what is the instrument used. An act of war is an act of war. I think what we've seen is some concern that because of the problems of attribution in the cyber domain, that it's going to be hard for states to definitively say that it was state A that attacked it as opposed to state B. But I think that fundamentally the laws that we have on the books in terms of the United Nations Charter, law against attack, or the prohibition against aggressive attack, the laws of self-defense and the like, and including the international laws concerning humanitarian action in warfare, I think they do all apply. I think what we've learned, though, is that there has to be some very serious international conversation about how to actually apply them and how to understand when exactly they do apply in respect of actions in cyberspace. So there's a big debate going on out there. It needs to happen. Whether in the end that means we have new treaties on the rules of war for cyberspace is another question. And many governments like the United States and the United Kingdom don't believe that that's necessary.
There is heavy cyber filtering across the Middle East, and Turkey will soon be employing a filter system as soon as the summer. Naturally, there are arguments for and against cyber filtering. Does the leadership of sovereign states have the right to protect citizens from content that can be harmful? And at what point does filtering allow for cyber dictatorships?
Well, that's a very tough question, Alan, and I must say that it's a question that's not resolved anywhere in the world. For example, in India there are pretty tough laws in the cyber domain. In the United Arab Emirates there are fairly tough laws. In China there are very tough laws. But even when you look at domains or jurisdictions such as the United States and the United Kingdom, there's no agreement on the balance to be struck between what on the one hand is a civil liberties argument and what on the other hand is a law enforcement argument. What's going on, for example, in the European Union, the United States and Britain, which is a part of the European Union, is really a contest between those people who argue for absolute freedom, no restrictions on civil liberties, and very eminent people from the legal profession and from the law enforcement agencies who say that we do need much stronger controls on what passes through the internet. We need much stronger controls on the identity validation of people who use the internet, and we can't operate in the cyber domain safely unless we have these stricter controls. And I think that we'll see that play out in different ways in the Corridor 39 area. We're already seeing it play out, for example, as I mentioned, the United Arab Emirates has got a highly developed set of laws. They've made some important innovations in their practice with regard to cyber security and what you might call cyber laws. They've set up, for example, special cyber courts. But on the other side, the experience recently in Egypt where social media, advanced social media, have been used to foment political mobilization, then we can see already this conflict or this tension that I've talked about in general, that's sort of worldwide, is playing itself out in this Corridor 39 region as well.
Senator, can you comment on the cyber filtering issue?
Yeah, I think it's a sensitive issue. I mean, we talked a lot about the cybersecurity, and I think governments should take part for the right legislation, for the right measures, for the right regulation. And I think it's really an international issue. It's not only a local issue. But on the other hand, we should be very careful about not blocking, not limiting really valuable information getting distributed. So I think anything related to crime, anything which can be clearly related to crime might be filtered, controlled, regulated. But anything else, I think it should be left to the individual decision.
Like, say, security and terrorism, things, I guess that would be under the crime
Of
pretext,
course,
but anything that would endanger national security.
I think it would, I mean, that's what I meant. So if you are giving the description of building a bomb, a very clear and right description of building a bomb on internet, that should be controlled, that should be limited, that should be filtered, that should be blocked, whatever. Of course, it's clear. But there are some other, issues which might be right for some cultures, which might be wrong for some cultures, I mean content, and then I think it should be left to the individuals, to the organizations. It should be left to the cultures. that they're living in. So let's say you shouldn't take a measure on an international level to limit a content which is good for some culture or right for some culture and which is wrong for some other culture.
Yeah, it's a very, very subjective issue. Serdar, thank you very much for being with us today.
It was a pleasure for me too.
And I hope to have you again.
Thanks for inviting.
Digital technology has made us reliant on systems that we are ill-equipped to protect and raises debates on how to patrol a domain that transcends international boundaries. The race continues between those who defend and those who attack those digital systems. That concludes Corridors 39's Cybersecurity Special. See you next week.